So I was going to go right back again. So you only did a year and a half, you said, of karting. And we've had a couple of drivers on, the likes of like Sheldon van der Linde jumps to mind. You know, he didn't do too much karting, but he jumped into it was like the Polo series.
Polo, yeah.
And something I'm sort of noticing is the guys who have sort of got out of karting early and into a car have actually had quite successful careers off the back of it. Do you think jumping out of a car early and getting in a car early really helps you form the start of your ability almost?
Yeah, it definitely does. I think it is twofold. I think one is if you stay in the karting world a little bit too long, you'll spend a lot of money, especially as you try and climb the ladder to more expensive classes, more expensive races. And B, it doesn't always translate. Now, that being said, if you are at the top of your game and you win, world championships or European championships or Super One or whatever, you're naturally going to be fairly quick in anything. But the reverse side of that is if you're mid-pack in those championships and then keep pushing to keep doing it more and more and more, when actually, if you realize you just kind of came out of that world and tried a car, it's a very different driving style. And as long as you've got the basics and you're good enough, if you're mid-pack in Super One or in any European World Championship in a go-kart, there's a strong chance you could be good, if not better, in a car. And I learned those skills in a car very early. At 13, 14, I was testing that T car at airfields and getting used to car control. And there's a few other drivers that have done similar. And I think it translates really well into a good career.
Is T cars like what we have now with Jeunesse Juniors? Kind of.
Yeah, kind of. It was a space frame chassis. It was a little bit quicker top end, looked a bit more like a BTCC car in the sense that it was larger. But at the time it was T cars, Junior Jeunesse just came out, and then it was like Sax Max, I think.
Yeah. The guy that springs to mind is a good friend of ours, is Seb Morris, because he basically tells the same story, that he said he was in karting and he couldn't believe how much people were spending, and he basically had no chance unless he was going to spend on their level effectively, especially on engines Super One. And he said he just jumped out of into a car, I think a Formula Renault, but then straight away into a Jeunesse Junior. And he won. And he said he straight away said it was the best thing he ever did. There was no reason for him to stay around in karting. So it seems like you say, if you stay in too long in karting, you can easily, find yourself sort of spending far too much and then suffering even to get into the first step of car racing world.
Yeah, exactly. I think making that jump, especially with these championships now that allow younger drivers to come in, is a good, wise move. And also it tells you the other way around. If you're not good and you're crap and you get into cars and you find out I really don't suit this, I only suit karting, it also tells you your path quite early at a young age, which is, okay, if I want to carry on karting, it will be a hobby, because the karting's never going to lead to Formula One anyway, because I've tried cars and I wasn't very good in it. So that would be a tough pill to swallow as a young kid. But at least if you go in there early and tried it for 1 or 2 years and you literally are nowhere and it's not working, then at least you know.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you see quite a few of the karting families actually fizzle out in terms of finances, like you've mentioned. So they're super good and they're chasing that European or world title, and they're spending 150,000 when they could have been doing some testing in a 2-litre Renault or whatnot. And then they go to make the jump and they realize it's the same cost, but they've already spent all the money that have saved. So then they never actually get to see if they're good enough.
Mate, I remember someone in karting, I won't name his name, but he briefly got onto the RSF program in karting, and the chassis was a top kart chassis. It wasn't the best at all. And it was no doubt not going to win the championship in it, but he was doing a good job in it. And he decided to leave the RSF program mid-season to go and jump on a Tony kart so he could try and win the championship. And it's just like that. It's a bit short-sighted in a way.
But it can happen. Yeah, it can happen. People just are short-sighted in motorsport in any sense, I guess, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing I'm very jealous of with you, Ollie, is you kind of got to race in the prime of British F3. I started karting when I was in 2010, but then karting cars 2013. At that point, it was already 2 or 3 years out of its prime, really. I think 2011 was probably its last good year. And I remember how many guys were racing in it, at the top level guys, like you say, Jev and Ricardo and people like this. I'm so jealous that you got to race at that time.
Yeah, it was. It definitely makes me a little bit nostalgic, and definitely realised that I'm definitely no longer classed as a young racing driver, because I actually see the new Formula 3 cars, and you know, you kind of start thinking, oh, it was different in my day, and you're like, oh,
I'm not one of
young
those now.
anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, the 2010, 2011, those F3 cars were just wicked, and it almost didn't matter so much that, I mean, we knew how much Carlin was spending, and the Chiltons had just bought Carlin at that time, and we knew they had a good wind tunnel and a lot of progress and development. But it almost didn't matter so much, because you knew if you can do your bit, you would get the attention, because people knew which cars were quick, which were spending the money on engines. I mean, there was even quali engines then. I mean, I even remember once we left Magny Court, we were leading the championship, VW just came to the next round, and Vern would just go out in each quali, do 3 laps, and just come in with a motor that's pretty much smoking out the back, literally on fire, and just change the engine and just go out again the next time. But it did make it very much like mini Formula One at that time, and you knew back then you were being watched in the same way that kind of Formula One teams look at the Formula 2 screens on the weekend. You knew if you did the right thing, you'd be in a good place.